Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. We are in Acts chapter 22, not 23, or 23. Oh, okay. And as we said, we're in this from here to the end of the book uh, is the journey of Paul's not imprisonment, but arrest. He is under arrest. And what had happened was when he went to Jerusalem, and um, he as you remember the story in chapter 21, he was warned by disciples by the Spirit not to go to Jerusalem, and then Agabus the prophet had prophesied what would happen to him when he went to Jerusalem, meaning he would be arrested. He gets to Jerusalem. He goes into James in the Jerusalem church. They persuade him because they were trying to not. Paul was a problem because, and this is my take, they never dealt properly with the Jewish problem, meaning those Jews who tried to enforce the Old Testament law, marry the Old Testament law to the gospel. And so basically they said, well, they told Paul that, hey, everybody's going to hear that I hear, and there's been a lot of buzz, a lot of talk about you. So I'll tell you what, let's squash this. We have some guys here, take them, you pay for them for their vows under the purification of the Old Testament law. And people would know that, all that stuff they heard about Paul is nonsense. Boy, did they get it wrong. Paul did it. And on the last day of the purification, right, ritual, the Jews from Asia saw him and again incited a riot. And the mob attacked Paul with beating him. The Roman soldiers came and rescued Paul from the mob. From that point on, he was, in a sense, under arrest. Now, the problem, of course, is he's a Roman citizen, which added other issues and problems for the Roman side. And as we're going to see, they were getting ready to scourge Paul, whip him. And he had to tell him, hey, I'm a Roman citizen. Now, the benefits of being a Roman citizen is you better have your stuff right. You cannot be violated. Your rights could not be violated without consequences. Would to God that our laws were that way too, but I digress. So when they heard that, they was like, oh boy, we're in trouble. So this is kind of where we are now, because now Paul's journey is going to be, and God is using this detainment, arrest, that he is put in positions that under normal circumstances, he never would have been able to be in a position. So even speaking to the Jewish crowds, doing Passover, where you had thousands of people at Jerusalem during this time period, he was able to preach the gospel to them. And so we're going to see in each step of the way, he's going to be brought into different Roman officials, where again, under normal circumstances, he never would have had that opportunity. So God is using this opportunity by the arrest of Paul. He's using this as an opportunity, and also, just so you know, some of these letters that came from Paul as well. So, let me put it up here. Let's go to Acts chapter 23. All right. So, remember last time too, Paul, when he was standing, uh, well, we would say in the court, he did something funny where he looked at it and he said he saw the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and he actually used their hatred of one another, and they diverted. They had gotten together because their hatred for Paul was disrupted by their hatred of one another, which is also sad because we see the same thing today with people um, religiously. Denominations, believe it or not, they hate each other. They don't like to admit it, but they do. So then when he said that, they start fighting among each other. Okay. So I'm going to pick it up at verse 11. Now, here is something interesting. Verse 11. The following night, the Lord stood by him and said, "Have courage, for as you have testified about me in Jerusalem, you must also testify in Rome." So again, God is using this. Now, this brings some interesting light here. I mean, something interesting. Let's kind of go back, remember, in chapter 21, how, and let's look at the sequence of events and this, I don't know, let's see if we can make sense of this. First, you have Paul being warned by disciples through the Spirit not to go to Jerusalem. Then when Paul comes to, I don't know if it was Antioch or not, but no, Caesarea. He comes to Caesarea where Philip the evangelist, not Philip the, yeah, Philip the evangelist, he had his 7 daughters who prophesied, and then Agabus the prophet, who was an established prophet, came and prophesied and said, don't, now he didn't say tell him not to go, but he told him what would happen if he went, meaning he would be arrested. So how do you do that? We kind of ask the question again, was Paul wrong for going to Jerusalem? And then as we see here, Jesus now tells him, have courage. For as you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so must you also testify in Rome. So it's kind of confusing because on the one hand, you had where Paul by the Spirit was told not to go to Jerusalem. And now Jesus is saying, just as you have testified about me in Jerusalem. So how, from God, I think there's, what's confusing is that where the disciples told him not to go. So at the time I said, well, let's say he could have not went at that time. But as we can see, it seems to have been God's plan all along. Now, Paul, again's ministry was unique in that God used him on multiple levels. The revelation that Paul was given about the mysteries of Christ, the churches he started, his ministries to the Gentiles, and now notice what he says here: God is going to use him to testify all the way to Rome. So, I guess the biggest question is don't know, right? Don't know. But here's the thing here. And it could be that, okay, well, you didn't listen at Jerusalem when I told you not to go, but since you are here, right? You can have that kind of, since you're here. Well, since you're here, now notice he said, have courage. Now, another thing is sometimes we don't always feel, we don't always see, the inflections. But here's the thing here, that we kind of forget the human side of Paul. And sometimes we think that, Paul was energized by the Spirit, that he almost kind of like just floated along and all that. No, Paul was very much human. And he was very much had human feelings. And in the sense that even though he did this great work for Jesus, oftentimes it was a lonely role, because remember, he had a lot of opposition, and it doesn't feel good. So some of us never get that kind of opposition because we're not in those kind of situations. Paul had a lot of oppositions, a lot of criticism, and then on top of that, he had a lot of persecution. It doesn't feel good. It's good to say, well, the Lord delivered me out of them all. Yes, that's wonderful, but it doesn't feel good going through them. Okay, it doesn't feel good. And so notice when Jesus says, "Have courage," those words strengthen Paul. They strengthen Paul. Have courage. So, for as you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so must you testify about me in Rome. Verse 12 is, when it was day, the Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves under a curse, neither to eat nor drink until they have killed Paul. I kind of always chuckle when I read this, because we're going to see it's about 40 people that got together. They formed this, they made this vow. And notice this, they put themselves under a curse to neither eat or drink until they have killed Paul. So we'll come back to this, because let's track this. Let's track this here. Okay, so this is day one. We're not going to eat or drink until we have killed Paul, right? Now, it also tells you the paganism, the superstition. Verse 13, there were more than 40 who had formed this plot, and these men went to the chief priests and the elders and said, we have bound ourselves under a solemn curse that we won't eat anything until we have killed Paul. Notice who they went to, the chief priests. So they were involved in the conspiracy, also the corruption. These are supposed to be the highly religious people. He says, so now you, along with the Sanhedrin, make a request to the commander that he brings him down to you, as if we're going to investigate his case more thoroughly. However, before he gets near, we are ready to kill him. So they make this plot. Now, the roads, see, what they were going to do, and this is why you would sometimes see that even the apostles, maybe carry like little weapons and stuff, because traveling at night was dangerous. It's, in a lot of respects, it was more dangerous because you was out in the open and they didn't have computer systems and all that, cell phones and stuff. You could be killed. For example, it would be not only dangerous but foolish for a woman to travel at night by herself on an open road. She could be taken advantage of, as well as raped and so anyway. All right, so that's their plot. But look at this. But the son of Paul's sister. Now, this is one of the first times we're kind of hearing of Paul's family. And again, we don't have a lot of detail, but notice this, Paul's sister. We know that his family was very, very religious. They were Pharisees. Remember, Paul comes from a family of Pharisees. So they were in the mix. But notice this, Paul's nephew. Okay. So Paul's son, and they probably didn't know as they were talking about this, because they probably was blabbing out loud. And this also shows you how neat the Lord is, that, this is what you can see. Here's this miraculous without being these kind of like, flashy miracles. But the fact that Paul's nephew was there and heard this plot. But the son of Paul's sister, hearing about the ambush, came and entered the barracks and reported it to Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions and said, take this young man to the commander because he has something to report to him. So he took him and brought him to the commander and said, the prisoner Paul called me and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you. Then the commander took him by the hand, led him aside, and inquired privately, what is it that you have to report to me? The Jews, he said, have agreed to ask you to bring Paul down to the Sanhedrin tomorrow. Now keep this in mind because the Sanhedrin were in Jerusalem. That's going to come back up again. Watch this. So then, as though they were going to hold somewhat more careful inquiry about them, but don't let them persuade you because there are more than 40 of them arranging to ambush him, men who have bound themselves under a curse to not eat or drink until they have killed him. Now they are ready, waiting for a commitment to you. So the commander dismissed the young man and instructed him, don't tell anyone that you have informed me about this. And he summons two of his centurions and said, get 200 soldiers ready with 70 cavalry and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight. Also provide mounts. They put Paul on them and bring him safely to Felix, the governor. So now we're going to see this first. He's going to be brought to Felix, the governor. But again, notice not only is now Paul is getting a escort, 200 soldiers and 70 cavalry, 200 spearmen. So they really, y'all want to fight? Okay. Now, he wrote this letter of this kind, Claudius Lysias, to the most excellent governor Felix. Greetings. He says, we have this man that had been seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them. I arrived with my troop and rescued him because I learned that he was, and because I had learned that he was a Roman citizen, he kind of left out that he was going to scourge him. But anyway, wanting to know the charges they were accusing of him, I brought him down before the Sanhedrin. I found out that the accusations were about disputes, a matter of their law, and that there was no charge that merited death or change. And when I was informed that there was a plot against him, I sent him right away. I sent to you right away, and I also ordered his accusers to state their case against him in your presence. Therefore the soldiers took Paul during the night and brought him to Antipatris, as they were ordered, and the next day they returned to the barracks, allowing the cavalry to go on with him. And when these men entered Caesarea, they delivered the letter to the governor. They also presented Paul to him. And after he read it, he asked what province he was from. And so when he learned he was from Cilicia, he said, I will give you a hearing whenever your accusers get here too. And he ordered that he be kept under guard in Herod's palace. So that's the first plot. Again, this is kind of amazing how God will protect you. And sometimes you don't even know that the work of God, how the work of God is progressing. I mean, it's just, you don't even know sometimes that God is working his his will, working his miracles on your behalf. But they're not the exciting ones, right? These are kind of, I'm going to say, these are kind of little miracles. They're miracles nevertheless, because all of a sudden Paul's nephew was there that heard this plot. And by the way, we're at day 1 or 2 of their plot. They have to be kind of getting hungry. I want to chart these guys because it's kind of funny, how they vowed that they were, they vowed not to eat or drink. So, okay, they're on their way. And notice how God is spoiling their evil plan, okay, to kill Paul. I think in America, we do take this for granted, that these kinds of plots really wouldn't work. They really wouldn't work in America the way they were more easier. And if God wasn't on Paul's side, yes, he probably would be dead. Think about that. If God if God wasn't on Paul's side, he would be dead. The plan probably would have worked out. Of course, they probably wouldn't hate Paul as much anyway. But anyway, all right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome, and I will see you in the next study.